Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to you all. My name's Harleen, and I'll be your host for today's session. I hope you've all had a great day so far and are now excited and ready for the brand new informative session of the Masterclass series organized by the Institute of Product Leadership. I'd like to kickstart this session by welcoming and introducing our speaker for this evening, Mr. Amit. Amith is a seasoned product leader with over 20 years of experience in networking and telecommunications. With expertise in market research, product strategy, and go to market execution, Amit has a proven track record of driving product success. Beyond his professional roles, Amit serves as a mentor with NASCOM 10,000 startups and is an angel investor in retail and HR tech. His passion lies in fostering innovation and empowering the next generation of entrepreneurs. So pleased to have you join us this evening, Amit.
Thank you, Herlin. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. Welcoming you all again, and this is about user story mapping for product development. Um, so when we talk about users, okay, let me begin by introducing the topics that we cover today. So basically, we'll be talking about agile a little bit. I mean, though the session is not on agile, when we talk about user stories, generally it's associated with agile, so we need to know some we need to have some background on agile. If at all you're not aware or you've not worked on agile, we'll just do a quick recap on some of the values and principles of agile. Okay. Then we'll delve into the user story fundamentals. What is user story, um, what is the format in which it is written, and some of the best practices. And then we'll move ahead on to the advanced topics of acceptance criteria for user stories, how to arrive at those. I mean, how do you actually uh, get the acceptance criteria for each of these user stories, and then splitting, mapping user stories and estimation, and so on. Okay. Okay. So I said, whenever we talk about user stories, we generally map it in our minds to agile processes. So why is it so? Because if we look at the traditional methods, like the waterfall or any other spiral or any other methods that were being followed earlier or even today in some of the companies, there is this basic difference in perspective, right? So when we are doing traditional requirements collection, we would follow the systems perspective, wherein all the requirements are from the systems or solution point of view. So you are eliciting the requirements in terms of what the system should be capable of, what the system should perform, or what the end goal from the system perspective. There is a slight shift here in when we are talking about user stories. The all the requirements are collected from the user's perspective, right? When I say user perspective, it will be based on a particular user. It may be an end user, it may be a developer, it may be the owner, the business owner, or from the business side, from the technical side. So the user would write down his requirement. We'll discuss on the format in which it is written, but it gives the user's requirement in user perspective and not the system perspective or the solution perspective, right? So having said that, I think we will just pause and watch a video here which talks about some of the agile agile manifesto, so to speak, so that um, some of these things we map it to agile. So it's better to get a small recap on agile. So we'll also talk about what is there in the video. I mean, we'll just take a quick look at the video first. So basically, these are the values. So what it says is individuals and interactions over processes and tools, and working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, responding to change over following a plan. So if you see all of these, it gives a lot of emphasis on giving value to the customer more frequently, and not not worrying too much about providing a comprehensive documentation, even though documentation plays a very important part of any software product, and contracts negotiations also play a major role, but the agile ways emphasizes on working together with the customer in giving value to the customer, and that's where all these values come in. Okay, so moving on to the next part. Okay, so basically, the manifesto talks about some of these things which we saw. Um, you know, as I said, it believes in giving continuous value to the customer, even though it might not be the entire product or the entire functioning product. It continuously works with the customer, takes changes in requirements sooner, in the cycle of the development, and incorporates that in the product. So that is the values. And here, when you talk about principles, so all these things, as we saw in the video, they facilitate collaboration with the customers, and uh, mostly giving the value, right? So moving on, so what are user stories? Basically a small unit of work, told from the user's perspective, explaining the desired functionality. So it has to be the it need not be a each unit of work that is told from the user perspective might not be a complete feature, right? So it is the smallest unit of work that is told from the user's perspective to get the desired functionality, and it is told in a non-technical language. So this is where it differs in perspective from system, collecting the traditional requirement from the traditional method, where it is in the it's from the system perspective. So this basically, we'll see how we uh, write the user stories. We'll understand how it is mapped into the product backlog, and how the prioritization is done, and then how it gets into the sprint backlog, and what is the duration of each sprint, and all that in the slides to follow. But to understand why do we need user stories, uh, when we are working in a team, and when we are working with the businesses working along with the customer in a partnership, there is this forms a kind of shared understanding between various teams, and also with the customer, the product team, the the business teams, the development teams, and the customer. And it this is a way in which all of them can come together and brainstorm their ideas and provide the elicit the requirements, and also change it based on the details that they gather as a team, and then focus and deliver on the highest value with each user story. So this helps in addressing the challenges and the pain points through early feedback, because it throughout the development and throughout this process, customer is involved, the business is involved, and also the product teams are involved. So how do we write the user story? Like, it has three parts to it, right? Who, what, and a why, right? So when I'm talking about who, it is as a type of a user, be it customer, be it a customer, be it if you're using it internally for some of the technical requirements, for some of the learnings, or if it is the end user or it is the business owner. So you can give that here, like as a type of user, what would deal with the goal that you would like to accomplish with this, the small unit of work that is accomplished. So and why is it required, right? So that I can accomplish this uh, you know uh, thing, this particular thing. So if you're talking about an example, um, see here, this is a generic example as a music app user. So this is the who part of it. What is, I want to create playlists, okay, and why is, so I can organize my favorite songs, right? This is as simple as it can get. So this is a user story, right? An example two, as a library member. Library member is the type of the user, and I want to renew books online. This is the goal. So I can keep them longer without visiting the library. This is the why part of it. So this is how, I mean, these are generic examples of how simple the user stories can be, right? And this makes it you know like if it is a bigger user story, right? So estimating, say for example, this as an app user, I want to create playlists so I can organize my favorite songs. So this can you can have certain checklist of items that needs to be performed to get enable this. So and based on that, you can actually estimate by providing story points on how each of these features, like for example, enabling certain portions of software would take, and then you can decide on how big the user story is, depending on the story points, right? That's how you do it. We'll see it in the further slides. So if it is too big, then it becomes difficult to estimate, and also to accommodate within a single sprint. So always the best practice is to have it as small as possible, so that you can accommodate it in a single sprint of a few weeks. And also, I mean, when you're accommodating it, it includes everything, like the development of the feature, the testing, and also to be able to provide the MVP or the product to the customer to use and provide your feedback. So that is how it works. So you have to keep it as small as possible, as you possibly can, depending on the uh, uh, feature that you're developing. So the user stories, who is responsible for developing the user stories? Generally the product owner or the business analyst. In traditional methods also, the business analyst would elicit the requirements. So in the agile ways, product owner is the person who's the owner of creating the user stories. But at the same time, when he creates the rough draft of a user story, everybody in the team, including the product teams, the development teams, and people representing the customers, can add to it, can review it, and can provide input. So that way everybody should be in sync, on the same page when a user story is written. So even though product owner writes it, it's everybody's contribution there. So everybody contributes to it. So where do we get when is it written, and where do we get the inputs, and how do they collaborate? So there are various meetings, like daily stand up meetings, when they're talking about certain features and discussing certain things. Certain ideas might translate into a user story. When Mostly when we hear a lot of these user stories and these requirements come up during the product demos to the customer. um, when you're giving a demo to the customer about a particular feature, and you're explaining about how it caters to the customer needs and all of that, there is a point in a lot of questions that come up asking whether certain other things are supported, and those can be taken into the product backlog for future development. Story workshop sessions are conducted to come up with these user stories based on the feedback, based on the customer support team's interaction with the customers, and all other uh, interaction points with the customers. The backlog grooming sessions also are where these user stories can be developed. When you're writing user stories, follow these three C's. Like they say, it should fit in a card, in a small card. It should be as small as that. And conversation. So the between the product owner and all the product team members, and also the development team members, it should be a starting point of a conversation where each of them ask questions, get their questions clarified, and that is addressed in the user story point. If it is missed in the first place, that gets addressed and added. And if it is a big it gets bigger because of all those additions, it is then further split, and all the technical aspects are considered, and everything falls in place when a conversation is fostered among product teams, development teams, that way. And it should have that confirmation. So when you provide your input in when you have a user story which just gives the who, what, and why, it should also give a confirmation of how it is measured. So that is when we come up with acceptance criteria. We'll also look at how to write an acceptance criteria for an example user story and all that in the later slides. But yeah, confirmation through acceptance criteria. Moving on, um, so we have been talking about the traditional way of collecting requirements and the user stories. The user stories being user perspective, and requirements being the system perspective. The user stories, mainly followed in agile projects, and requirements, mainly followed in non-agile projects like the spiral, the waterfall, etc. So few other points here, like how are the requirements gathered in the traditional way. So there used to be targeted interviews. Our surveys were conducted with the end user, and there would be elicitation sessions. But all these would provide him inputs uh, uh, on the kind of goals and the requirements from the user by the user. But this all these would be one time activity. So then the business analyst would have to come back to the drawing table, and he would convert these requirements into into the system requirements, or the solution requirements. What is happening with user stories is these are discussions, continuous discussions and collaboration. As I said, the customer is also part of these discussions. The product team, who is closely interacting with the customer, the product owners, the product managers, are part of these discussions. The development teams, the technical teams are involved. So that way there is an ongoing and evolving output from these discussions, and it is a continuous thing, while these requirements collection is one time thing. So you can get the feedback early, you can catch those uh, uh, bugs early, you can actually deliver minimum viable product sooner to the customer. So with all those things, right? So user stories, like I said, even though it is written by a product owner, the entire team owns it, like the entire group, the product team and the development team, while the requirements, it's owned by the business analyst, right? Moving on, some confusion, some differences here. Like what are the difference between use cases and there is a typo here, use cases and user stories, right? So just to clear that the difference here. So user stories talks about everything that a user needs, right? Everything, the all the user needs and the goals and the features, everything are part of the user stories. Well, use cases, this is the system behavior. So how the system is expected to behave, so that is what a use case is, right? And user stories is a very small part of the system. Like I said, it's always better to have smaller chunks, to be able to better estimate, and also to be able to provide value to the customer sooner, and to be able to accommodate in sprints, right, of few weeks. Whereas use cases, it includes the system behavior of the entire system, or probably the additional systems that interacts with the system. So it is very large in scope, whereas user stories are very small in scope, and they meet particular user need, the smallest unit, right, as we mentioned earlier. Now, like covering all these terminologies, so that we will be able to map it and stitch them together in our minds, and able to get the picture. So what are user roles? So when you're writing about the who, so it's very, I mean, people write it as a user, which is very generic, and it is really not useful if you just type as a user, or if you write it as a user. So it's better to group some of these people with common needs, like expectations, interests, and behaviors, into a particular user role, and then use that as the who, in the who part of the user story, right? Like, for example, say a person logging into justbooks.com, right? uh, you can have either the book renters logged in. I mean, I just took a fictional example. I'm not sure whether the renters would be there, but the book renters would log in, the book buyers, and the book sellers, right? Even in each of these, the renters who are occasional, users, occasionally rent, frequently rent, occasionally buy, occasionally sell, frequently sell. So you can have subgroups as well. Similarly, when you're talking about persona, like the bag representation, the behaviors, aspirations, and the goals of a user. So this is completely fictional representation of the user using the hypothetical data. For example, you're talking about a prospective user, rather, you can use the image of that person, and you can say that the person is a college graduate, lives in a studio apartment, and is a minimalist, and the person logs in to look for self-help books. So this kind of personas will help you in identifying the persona to which you can target, you know and have the target segment, right? So that was about it. So now, moving on to the acceptance criteria. Like we said, writing user stories might not, I mean, it provides who, what, and why, but you also need to be able to measure it, right? So a set of conditions a product must meet to be accepted by a user, customer, or other system. So um, it gives you the way to measure that the user story, whether the user story is passes or it fails. And you should also be able to get a common understanding, right? So if it is too generic, and if it is for a particular role, for example, for a user role, then without providing the checklist, like I said, if whether the checklist items are met or not, you will not be able to say that the user story is completely developed, right? So for that common understanding, to also to be able to provide the scope of the user story, and like I said, validating it, whether the user story, the intended goal of the user story is achieved through this or not. And again, testing whether it passes or fails can be validating using these acceptance criteria. So the acceptance criteria is written. When do we write the acceptance criteria? When we write the user stories, and the user stories are will go into the product backlog. In the product backlog, based on the size, the estimation, and also the prioritization, it gets populated into various sprint backlogs. And before having any user stories into the current sprint backlog, the acceptance criteria for each of these user stories must also be developed. So that way, before starting any sprint, along with the user stories, you'll also have the acceptance criteria for each of these user stories handy. And um, and you'll once you are into the development testing phases of it, you'll also be able to measure and validate these user stories, and mark them as pass or fail. So that way, um, it is always good to have them before the sprint begins. So that is the standard. But like the format in which it is written, like I said, the checklist, a simple checklist where you just list out, okay, if after you develop this feature or this functionality, uh, it should allow these many number of users, or it should save in the following examples, it should save the songs added in the playlist, and then it should be able to view them later, and all that could be the checklist in the checklist, right? So acceptance criteria can be a simple checklist, or it can be in the form of given given the condition. When you perform that, then what happens, right? Like for example, given the music app provides the desired option. So I've considered the same example that we had used in the user story. As a music app user, I want to create playlists so I can organize my favorite songs. So who, what, and why is here. For the same thing, if I have to write the acceptance criteria, so acceptance criteria for that particular user story would be: given the music app provides the desired option, when I create a new playlist and add songs to it, right, then I should be able to save the playlists and view them later. So it's in the given when then form. Similarly, for the second one, we had, as a library member, I want to renew books online so I can keep them longer without visiting the library. So for the same thing, the acceptance criteria will be: given the system provides the option to renew it online, when I renew a book that is not overdue and not reserved by another member, then after renewal, the due date should be extended. So this will be my acceptance criteria. So once that feature is given, you can test this, validate based on this acceptance criteria. This is one of them. So you can have a checklist of them, and or a multiple of them, and you do not have to worry about the number of acceptance criteria points for each user story. It can have a large list of acceptance criteria for each single user story. And I mean, there is no like limit to how many number of acceptance criteria points you can have for each user story, right? So this is how it is done. Now we'll talk about the some of the best practices for acceptance criteria as well as user stories. So acceptance criteria, when you're writing a checklist, or when you're writing the given, when, then, right, it should be in plain English. So I do not want to have any technical jargons there. I do not want to have any complex English terminal, English verbose there. I just want to have a plain English, right? That is when a larger audience, like including the product team members, the stakeholders, the business people from the business side of it, or the customers who are involved in the technical development or not, will be able to easily follow it, and will be able to contribute. So that is the first and primary thing. And it should explain the intent of that particular user story or the particular feature, and it should not contain how to do it, right? It should not have information about any particular stack, or it should not give you any details of how it is to be done. It should only explain the intent of what should be done. So it should be measurable. Like I said, it should easily be able to make out whether it passes or fails. You cannot use things. You cannot have your user criteria saying, "I want a beautiful I mean, a very big playlist." So you have to give the number. So it has to be measurable, so that you can validate it and say whether it passes or fails the test. And like I said, long lists of acceptance criteria are okay. Later on you can if it has a very long list, later on you can split the user stories based on the acceptance criteria. You can have multiple user stories split from them. And also you can later add it to the product backlog, prioritize, and then include it in the sprint backlog wherever it fits. So user stories, whenever you are writing user stories, you have to keep these few points in mind, right? So it's the abbreviation is invest. So it has to be independent. If it is not independent, then even though you have developed a user story B, it will not be able to give any value to the customer until the user story A, which is if B is dependent on A, then you cannot give value to the customer until user story A is developed. So it's always better to have independent user stories, make it as independent as possible. So negotiable. So one of the basic principles of agile is to keep it open for change, and also to be able to add value to revert, or to be able to make corrections at any point in time during the discussions during the collaboration cycle. So negotiable, of course, it has to be negotiable, even in terms of the tools used, or the way a single task is performed, or the way the goal is achieved. All that should be negotiable. Valuable, every user story should add value. When you're delivering a MVP to the customer, every user story counts, and everything that is developed within the sprint is uh, you know um, uh, is estimated, and it is considered added into a sprint based on the story points. So it has to be estimable. It has to be small, so that you are able to estimate better, and it has to be testable to be able to test each user story, and provide value to the customer. So these things you have to keep in mind when you're writing user stories. And like I said, this is owned by the product owners, this is owned by the BA, and also the team contributes. There will be a lot of sessions wherein these things are brainstormed, then improvised, and all that happens, even for the acceptance criteria, right? So that's about the best practices for these artifacts. The users, basically the user stories are the documents which contain various user stories, right? And along with it, they have references to some technical documents as and when they progress. So that is also maintained and owned by the PO. Now, moving on to some of the non user stories. So when you are into a product development, when you're doing it in the agile way or in the non-agile way, so you come across a lot of um, questions, technical questions, or it could be you could hit a problem. It could be a design problem. You're not sure how to take it forward. You need to do some research to understand the design requirement, or you need to do some amount of analysis to be able to break it down and further decide on what and how that needs to be done, which tool to be used, and what is feasible, the compatibilities issues, and all that needs to be taken care. So just because you have user stories, you do not jump into the development. So you'll have to do some analysis research on the technical aspects of it, and investigate to be able to figure out the design problems and all that. So what you do is uh, I mean, these are also written or included in the form of user stories, wherein the end user would be a developer, or probably a UX designer, or probably a database designer, or anybody for that matter. That end user would use the user story format to do this analysis, the research. So if this is not done, usually you estimate for the user stories only in the agile process. So if you do not estimate for this, then it is very difficult to have a separate time dedicated for all these things, like the research, investigation, and answering all the design problems, eliminating the technical functional risks, and all that is required. But it cannot, you cannot do it uh, if you're not planning for it in agile process. So you also uh, put this in the form of a user story. Like for example, you're writing a user story like, as a developer, I want to replace our custom built solution with a standard library, so that we can reduce complexity and improve reliability. So this, if this is a user story, you'll also have story points to this, depending on how many hours you want to spend on this. And then you'll have acceptance criteria also, like once you arrive at a suitable standard library and all that, you'll be passing this user story, and this will be estimated for, and this will be prioritized and included in a sprint. So that way you'll not be uh, uh, left I mean, all these things will also be addressed within each sprint based on the priority, and also you'll be allocating time for it, so it will not be a stretch, or it will not be done outside of whatever is estimated. Similarly, these are called spikes. And similarly, related to spikes, these are also some other types of user stories, which are infrastructure and technical user stories. So, building infrastructure that is required to building the infrastructure that is required during the development process or during the testing process, and building the technical capabilities, if that is something new which is not in our which is not already there in uh, our uh, the technical infrastructure or the capabilities. Then you need to spend time on building those technical capabilities, or the infrastructure, or the tools, right? So those also can be captured as user stories. I mean, are the infrastructure and technical stories, they are in the format of user stories. So but the intended user would be the developer. So for example, here I've used, as a developer, I want to create an API for our service, so that third party developers can integrate with our platform. So this is something you need to spend time on. So if you do not include it as a user story, then this would not be estimated for, and you will not have time to do this activity. So this is very important to meet all the technical needs. And again, as I said, once you write this, you also commit it to the product backlog, and then prioritize, and it is used also in the sprint backlog based on the priority. So these are some examples of non-user stories. Right now we'll also be looking at. So as I said, it is very important to have very small units as the user stories. And you have to have that independence between two user stories. Like all these things, it has to be negotiable, each one has to be valuable, estimable, small. So when you're doing that, you need to know how the estimation is done in agile. So whenever you begin any feature development or product development, we are so much used to estimating in terms of man hours. Like we say, this feature can be completed in this many man hours, and feature Y in these many man hours. But what happens in Agile is estimations are not absolute; they are only relative. Like for example, you estimate like a set of features based on the relativity, like how much how much time would and another feature, how big is this feature compared to a smaller feature. So to do this very basic way of estimation, the t-shirt size is widely used, and in this method you either bucket your user stories under small, medium, or large. So all the smaller ones, like the smallest units, come under this bracket, and so on. The medium ones here and the large ones. There are many other estimation techniques which are similar to this, where you bucketize the features based on whether they are small, medium, or large. And apart from that, there are a little complex estimation methods like the Fibonacci series. So in Fibonacci series, so here also the estimation is relative. So you have a small basic unit of work, and that will be the minimum unit of work. So based on that, all the other user stories are numbered. So like when you talk about Fibonacci series, the first number is 1, the second is 2, the third number will be an addition of the first two numbers, so that will be 3, and the fourth number will be addition of the first three numbers, which is 5. The fifth number is addition of all the previous numbers, and it goes on. So this is how the Fibonacci series is. So you follow this way of estimation to bucketize the user stories into one of these numbers, right? And that way it will be easier for you to later say, for example, you can't fit 34 user story of 34 story points into one sprint of few weeks. So you can always break them into, say, 21 and uh, 13, and 21 and 13, right? So that way you can easily split them, and then based on your efficiency and the number of team members working in that particular sprint, you can uh, either decide to continue with doing this, or combine multiple small units into one, and work based on these numbers, right? So the number of story points per sprint, the number of story points, the total number of story points that you decide to complete in one sprint, is the team's velocity. Right, I'll tell you some of the challenges with this. Okay, what happens is, like, people have the mindset of giving the man hours, giving the estimate in terms of hours. So switching suddenly from providing estimate in terms of the time taken or the man hours taken, to relative in terms of small, medium, large, or in terms of these numbers, is going to be a challenge. So that needs to be mitigated by through a few cycles, and until it becomes habitual. So you need to recognize those team members who come from uh, the absolute estimation mindset, and you need to take steps in order to make it habitual for them and train them accordingly, right? And other things are like comparing estimates between projects or teams. So I said the number of story points per sprint is the team velocity. So this team velocity is different for different teams. So there is no way that you can compare the team velocity or even the estimates between different projects and different teams. So for example, I have a team, no, velocity of 34 in a particular team, and another team has a team velocity of a higher number. So it doesn't, you cannot conclude anything based on the team velocity, because it is specific to that particular team. It's like an incubation for that particular team, and it does not, you cannot derive anything out of it. So whatever the estimates and is very specific to the capabilities, to the list, the pool of user stories within that team and within that sprint. So all these things put together form the estimates or the story points for a particular team. So there is no way that you compare it with other teams team velocity, or even the estimates and also the projects. So these are some of the challenges you need to be aware of, and stop doing certain things. Now we have been talking about splitting user stories quite for a long time now, because if you have a very big user story and it cannot be accommodated in a single sprint, or probably if it has some dependency on a smaller user story, or if there could be many reasons, like if you're not able to estimate, say for a bigger user story you estimate 34, but when you break it into like three or four smaller user stories, you estimate say a much higher number, right? 13 for each, and then that amounts to a much higher number. So that way, accuracy wise, you have to have smaller units. uh, that way it will improve the accuracy for your estimate, and it helps you in prioritization. If you have smaller chunks, smaller units of user stories, it is definitely easier to place them in the product backlog and prioritize them, rather than having one big user story which you'll not be able to break it further. So that way it will not help in prioritizing it. It is also time consuming to be able to complete it, how much ever the team velocity you're working with. But um, it is also not very accurate, like whatever the story points that you have given might not be very accurate. So um, if you're able to complete more smaller user stories done within a sprint, you'll be definitely be getting quicker feedback, and you'll be going back to the customer more frequently, and with a lot of MVPs, and that way you will be constantly learning from this, and providing going getting closer to what the customer need is, and you'll be able to uh, better achieve it through these cycles, and clarity on the testing requirements also. So you'll be iterating it much faster with smaller user stories than doing it with larger user stories with larger time stamps. So how this is the why of splitting user stories. Then what do we do these are some of the ways we can think of, like splitting with simplicity, as it says, uh, keep all the simple user stories, group them together, keep it in one bucket, and perform it in say sprint one, get them done, and provide it for testing, and let the users use it, and then they come back with the feedback loop. We fix it and then we go back to the customer. That way, having simple user stories addressed first will help you to start going back to the customer more frequently. Like that is the simplest way that we can think of in on how to split user stories. Then splitting with the workflow. So workflow is like, consider the best example would be the e-commerce, which has a workflow of certain things. Like first thing I can think of as a user is browse for the products, right? And then the next thing in the workflow would be to compare the products, and then you after you compare the products, you say decide to buy a product. So manage your cart, all that, and then you pay through your credit card, through your whatever that, and then you receive the order confirmation email and all that. So this is the workflow. So each of this flow you can split, further split, and then whichever is the smallest unit, you can have it as a separate user story which can be accomplished much sooner, and later all these things can be stitched together and checked. The third way Now, splitting the user story is through a method called CRUDE. So CRUDE stands for create, read, um, and create, read, update, and delete. Right. This is how any database would work. So based on the way that you perform the create, read, update, and delete, you can split the user stories. The basic example would be like if you're on any particular job portal, you're uploading your resume. The sorry so splitting with the entry method. So entry method is like the way you are uploading your picture, for example, in a particular site. It could be from your gallery, from the from some website, or from some other place. That is the way in which you upload your picture. Or it could be the way you upload your resume, right? So it could be you enter all the details of your experience, or you could upload a word format of your resume, the PDF format. So these are all based on the entry methods. You can again split the user stories. And splitting with spikes, we discussed what spikes are. These are not actual user stories which provide value to the customer, but these are required to get the technical and the design aspects of the development answered. So you can also split the user stories based on the spikes. That I see a couple of hand raised, but I think what we'll do is the questions and the chats and the we'll take the questions. There are a few more slides. Once we complete all the slides, we'll try to answer the questions in the end. Right. So moving on. So hope that works with all. Arlene. So moving on with the next aspect that we wanted to discuss today is mapping user stories. So user story mapping. So what is a user story map? It's a visual depiction of a product. Visual depiction of a product, and it gives you all the components and features within that user story. So uh, like I said, the simple example of e-commerce website where we browse the products as a user, we compare the products, we manage the cart, and then we manage the payment, and then we do the order confirmation and all that. So browse the products, we can further break them down into some of these things, like you look for the product catalog, you browse through the product catalogs, go through them, and then you search by the price, search by the SKUs, brands, etc. So all that you can put it under the browse the products user story, right? So similarly, comparing the products, you look at the pictures, you look at the descriptions, you go through the pricing, and then also the reviews. So that is what you do while you're comparing the product. So these actions as a user will be under the compare the product user story. So when you move to the manage cart, right? You in while managing cart, what all can you think of? You add products, you remove products, you adjust the number of products that you want to buy, purchase, and then also you save it for later and all that. So you have a wish list, you save it for later. These are all the user stories that can come under managing cart. They can all be under them, the components and the features, right? So managing payment, again, paying with credit card, paying with discounts, paying with coupons, paying. So there are so many other things that you can do while managing the payment. Like you can select the time of payment, or you can select pay later and all that, right? So order confirmation and shipping details, that is when you receive the email confirmation and the amount that you have paid for it, the bills, receipts, and all that happens at that. So all these are users. This is how you can divide all these user stories, and then um, these are how. So basically, you are like creating a map you're mapping those all these user stories into the main user story to make it a complete user flow, right? So it's like a list of, it gives you a very high level view of user activities. And like I said, it's a narrative flow. Like for me as a user, I open a e-commerce page and perform all these things at a very high level. I browse the products, compare them, manage my cart, and get the confirmation. So that was the narrative flow. Dependencies between user stories, yeah, so this can be established when you do the mapping. Like I said, if you write down all these main stories, and then the sub user stories or the components and the features of it, you'll know the dependency between each of these. So for example, if you have not yet devised a method of the managing the cart, you'll still not be able to complete the purchase, right? So that way the dependencies will definitely be understood better, and you also can find the missing pieces. So this gives a holistic view of the complete uh, flow, and the missing pieces can be identified, and also like the components and features will be very clear from mapping the user stories. Right, for this I have a small video. I'll just open the video and share just the video.
User story mapping is a lean UX mapping method that uses sticky notes to outline the steps and interactions users will go through in a digital product. Story maps are visualized from the perspective of the product and include 3 types of user actions at different levels. The first level is for activities, and these represent the core tasks that users aim to complete in the product or feature. For example, if we were working on a mobile banking application, 2 of our activities would likely be checking an account balance and depositing a check. You'll likely only have a few high-level activities in your story map. These usually display horizontally in order or in parallel if you're designing for multiple users and paths. Use the same color sticky notes for all of the activities in your story map. The second level of a user story map is for steps, which sit directly underneath their corresponding activities and also display in order on the map. They represent the specific subtasks that users will go through to complete the activity above. For example, the activity of depositing a check can be broken down into the steps of first entering the mobile deposit details, then photographing the check, submitting the check, and finally confirming the deposit. Use a different color sticky note to map out the steps and visually differentiate them from the activities. Details sit at the third level of the story map and describe the more granular interactions that are necessary for users to complete the step above. For example, entering a username or email address and entering a password would appear as 2 separate details underneath the login step. Use a different color sticky note for the details to keep the story map organized and the activities, steps, and details distinct. Once the story map is complete, Agile teams will often draw horizontal release lines and move details included in each release above the lines, leaving any deferred details below. The deferred details, along with any new activities, steps, and details added to the story map, become candidates for future sprints based on what the team learns and prioritizes over time. Story maps help support adaptation, which is what Agile is all about. It's much easier to swap out sticky notes during product planning and ideation than it is to revise hefty requirements documents or rewrite code. User story maps help Agile teams define what to build and help preserve visibility for how it all fits together. They enable user-centered conversations, team collaboration, and feature prioritization to align and guide iterative product development.
So very rightly so it is very difficult to change the code or even hefty documents. It's easier to do it with sticky notes, right? So to be able to move it around and to be able to replace some of them at the user story mapping stage would be much easier as compared to be able to replacing the code or rewriting the code, or even identifying the place in the hefty documents or in the comprehensive documentation where we need to change the ways of working. So that was the gist of it. So that way user story maps, uh, like we can talk about 2 things here, like output. So once we accomplish all the tasks, like if all the user story maps acceptance criteria are met, and it is continuously uh, evaluated, sent to the customer, and the feedback is included, the bugs are fixed, and everything is being done, then we are giving the output that the customer output to the customer. And there is a subtle difference between output and outcome, right? So output is like what, as a product we need to deliver, it is delivered to the customer. But when you're talking of outcome, so it involves not just the verbal, not only the verbal requirements are met, but also the intrinsic needs of the customer should be met when you are talking about outcome. So how will you be able to meet the intrinsic needs of a customer? It's only through watching him, allowing him to use the product, and then noting his uh, not only his feedback, the way he's trying to use the system. End of the day, it's all about how the customer is interacting with the system, how the user is using the product, right? It's all about user activities. So based on that, you can derive a few you can derive a few conclusions, and make some changes, keep learning. This adds to your learning curve, learning about the customer requirements also, and learning about the customer's intrinsic needs, and to evolve and to provide an outcome that is the intended outcome to the customer. So MVP is a minimum viable product. So according to Eric Rice, the lean startup guy, so MVP is a version of a new product which allows a team to collect the maximum amount of validated learning about the customer with least amount of effort, right? So this again translates to providing not just the output but the outcome. You work, collaborate with the customer, give him a new product which he can use, and he can you can then collect the maximum amount of validated learning about the customer when he uses the product. And that way you can plan these user stories will help you to plan many such MVPs, and then the release planning becomes easier with these user story maps. Like it gives you a holistic view of the product, and where we are at, and also the components and features as and when they are completed. You'll know the dependencies, and you'll know the missing pieces, and then you'll be able to uh, you know churn it, and get the feedback at a much faster rate as compared to any other methods, right? That's the main advantage of using the user story maps. um, okay. So I think this is the last slide, but a very important slide, which also talks about the common challenges. uh, so the first thing which I would like to I want addressed is the who and why part in the user story map. So remember, if you recollect, the user story map is who, why, and what, right? So who, what, and why. So who, like I said, many people use a very generic way of providing the who there. They do not use user roles. They do not group common people with common interests and all that. Also, they just use it as a generic term. They use the word user, which does not help. So generic representation of who will not help. So you have to either give a specific user, or at least you group the typical users with common interests into user roles, and give that user role at least. When it becomes very generic, it is difficult to give the outcome. So you can give an output, but you can never give the outcome unless you know who is the audience. And why is sometimes skipped. People just say, as a as a buyer, I would like to see this field, but they do not say why they need that particular field. Without that, it might take it tangentially, or it might not be easy to comprehend the exact need, and sometimes the end goal might not be met. So that's why it is very important to provide the why also. And handling bugs and defects. So again, in the cycle, in the continuous cycle, the customer facing teams or some users of the product may raise defects and bugs. So if you do not estimate for the bugs, for handling that estimate time and effort for handling these bugs and defects, then you'll have to squeeze between the sprints, your time and resources between the sprints, or during the sprint, if you're able to stretch or able to get additional time, or so it'll become very cumbersome if you do not estimate for these bugs and defects as well. So handle these bugs and defects which are provided by the customers or the users of the product continuously, like you handle a user story. So write them as a user story. uh, so try to even if a bug is like a major change, try to break it into a smaller unit, and then write the user story for each smaller unit, and then assign story points, and then when you prioritize the product backlog, whichever bugs are whichever user stories from those bugs are of higher priority, address them first. Maybe address them in the earlier sprints, and then those which are not very critical, you can plan them for later sprints, but treat them and estimate them and prioritize them the way you do it for the user stories. Otherwise, you can find it hard to accommodate them during the product development phase. So the third and again a very important one is of dealing with dependencies, right? So I also said, when you're writing a user story, you need to make it independent is the first and foremost thing, because you have a high priority user point, and it is included in one of the earlier sprints, and it is ready, but it will not work, or it cannot be delivered, or it cannot add value to the customer unless user story A is ready. So then what is the point in including this in the earlier sprint when A is not even done, right? So that way, uh, dependencies are not good. So dependencies, how to deal with it? Either combine, say for example, B has a dependency on A is not even there in this current sprint, then combine them both. Okay, combine them both. Try to remove the dependency and resplit in a way that it are they are no longer dependent on each other. Right, that is the simplest way of doing it. Otherwise, you swap them, like if A and B are both of same priority, right? uh, and B is dependent on A, then have A first in the first sprint, so you can swap them and probably get done. And then the third and most easiest way is do nothing, like just monitor. So it has dependency, okay, B is done in sprint 1, but still this cannot be delivered or tested or included in the MVP. So wait for another half sprint until A is done, right? Once A is also done, this dependency is solved. You keep monitoring. Once it is done, you initiate the MVP releases and release planning and all that. So the the next one is changing user stories mid sprint. So this is another very common challenge. You might be pressurized by some of the uh, business team members. Customer facing teams might say that this is a very highly critical feature or a user story which needs to be done in the sprint. So you're in the middle of a sprint and you're asked to accommodate that into your current sprint backlog. So it is not a big no. So any changes to the user stories mid sprint is not advisable. Be adding of new user stories, or descoping some of the existing or planned user stories, removing them or changing them is not advisable, at least during the sprint. Before the sprint and before the sprint backlog is populated and all that, you can do it. Once the sprint backlog is completed and you begin with a sprint, it should be locked within the sprint. No changes should be allowed to any user stories like addition, removal, all that is not advisable. I mean, again, if there are some work, I mean, uh, areas in your teams with your respective in your respective stage of development and the rapport with the customer and the way it comes across, you can make those amendments. But again, generically, wherever possible, do not allow changes mid sprint. It should be locked within the sprint. So this is all I had to cover. Um, so over to you, Harlin, and we can also take up some Q and A if there are any.
Of course. Thank you so much, Amit, for that wonderful session. You
Thank you.
provided some great, and thought-provoking insights. I'm sure everyone here would agree. Getting to the questions, our first question is the series of estimation wasn't clear. So maybe I think you can expand a little bit
Oh,
more
okay, sure.
on that.
Okay, so Fibonacci series. Basically, let me go back to that slide so that I can give you a. What happens in any estimation is like it. So relative estimation is based on the smallest unit or a smallest user story. The smallest user story would be bucketized into S. So if there is another user story, uh, which is bigger than that, right? So that goes into the medium bucket, and the ones which are bigger, larger than that, goes into the L bucket in normal T-shirt size or any other relative estimates. But in Fibonacci series, you have these Fibonacci series are a series of numbers. Basically, like you start. It starts with 1. The next number would be 2. The third number would be a sum of first two numbers, and the fourth number would be sum of all the previous numbers, and so on. So fifth number would be a sum of all the previous numbers. So that way Fibonacci series can be written. And how do you use it for estimation? So instead of just putting them under S, M, and L buckets, you have the option to fit them into much greater series of numbers. And then later, when you feel that some of the user stories that you have put under higher numbers are too big to handle in a sprint or in a few sprints, you can further try to divide them, and try to recategorize them into different smaller units. So this is a way of doing the estimation, which gives you a probably easier way to put story points per sprint. Like you give the story points based on the number of user stories that are being addressed in that particular sprint. You add them up, and that will be your uh, team velocity. So that way you calculate the story points based on these numbers and come up with a team velocity. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you for that explanation, Amit. We have
Mhm,
Anupriya next, who has
mhm.
firstly said, hello, great session so far. And then they have two questions. The first one is, I would like to know what should be the chronology of story map and Scrum project preparation. Which one should be prepared first out of the two?
So story map and Scrum project preparation, I think, see, Scrum is um, a part of, I mean, is an agile way of doing things. In agile, what happens first is you elicit the user requirements, create your user stories, right? And then these user stories uh, are uh, are made into the product backlog. And in the product backlog, when you are actually looking at the individual user stories, you need to make sure they are first of all independent and all that. So when you're talking about Scrum project preparation, I think this would involve creating product backlog, and then planning your the duration of each of these scrums and all that. So any agile project for that matter would start with creating user stories, and then coming up with a product backlog, understanding like dependencies if there are any, and also prioritizing them, and planning your the scrums or the sprint duration, and then all that. So I would say the chronology would be requirements collection, right? Like coming up with your user stories. And once you have probably you completed a couple of sprints and you're able to um, uh, you know uh, uh, provide it in the form of a story map, I mean the in terms of end user activities, then you would do the story mapping and then plan for MVPs, and then the release planning will be done. But the first thing, you will always collect requirements and go the in the same way, same order.
Of course. Thank you, Amit. Anupriya's second question is: are story maps also groomed after the sprint review?
uh, yes. So there are many occasions wherein new ideas are probably the better ways of doing the ones will come up during the review. So those will be addressed during the sprint grooming sessions, and also it will be uh, brainstormed, and probably uh, there are instances where it can be completely changed also. That kind of brainstorming happens during the grooming sessions, and yes, it is definitely possible.
Great. Thanks for that. Um, uh, we have Sayada who's asked, please explain the spider technique of splitting the user story.
I'm sorry, Sayada, I've not come across the spider technique. So there are many ways
Spider
of
is SPIDR.
okay. Yeah, so there are various methods. I mean, some people abbreviate it, I mean, different people abbreviate it differently, but basically you can split it based on any convenient method, based on like I mentioned a few of them, like the common points, right? It could be as simple as based on the workflow and all that. So spider, I'm not sure what it stands for, but it would be based on a common uh, some commonalities, like you group them into certain common user stories, and then take them up first, or you do it probably based on the sequence or chronology, or probably based on certain end results, like in database, the create, read, update, and delete. So depending on the relevance of each user story, you probably split them for the ease of completing and providing value to the customer as soon as possible. So it could be one of those methods, but yeah, sorry, I do not know what SPIDR stands for.
No worry. We have Prasad next, who has asked if there are story points which don't fit into the Fibonacci series, then how to segregate into appropriate t-shirt size.
So this will be like at a very high level. So you will be grouping them into either small, medium, or large. Like small would be the one which provides the reference for most of the other user stories. So you'll try to compare them and try to bucket them. So small definitely in that case will have a range. Say if it is uh, you know um, um, if it is not going to be taking a week, more than a week, or probably not going to take more than a couple of days to complete it, it will be small, or some kind of an internal reference point that you can have as a team to define what is small. And medium would be something which takes from somewhere around 1 week, or I mean, this is something hypothetical which you can uh, define in your team. That's why I said each team can have a different definition of for the estimation. So you can have your own definition, and you can do follow that particular definition to mark them as S, M, or L. So similarly for L, you can have like a couple of weeks to 4 weeks or something like that, which a user story which takes around that time will be bucketized under L. So this kind of heuristics you can have within the team. These heuristics can be followed, and for all the user stories within the sprint or even the product. Hope that answers.
Great, thank you for that, Amit. We have Tirtha next, who has asked us 6 questions. So I'll go one
Oh,
by one. Right.
sure.
The first one is, does detailing of user stories differ from B2B to B2C platforms, as it might be confusing and irrelevant at times?
Right. Okay. So it's a good question. So yeah, definitely there will be some nuances when you compare B2B user stories with B2C. Of course, B2C will be more from the end users, and also from how the users interact with the product. But B2B, I mean, the format will remain the same. The way you write the user story will still remain the same. The way you stitch various user stories to give a minimum viable product also remains the same. There could be certain nuances which you know uh, which probably will not affect the way in which it is performed. So it still follows the same chronology until it goes to the customer, because even when you are doing in a B2B, the customer, if he's not the user of the product, he'll be at least the one of the personas who has a stake in defining the way the product behaves. So that way you will still be interacting with the customer, who is the first user of the product, and you'll be getting the requirements through that channel, if not from the end customer. Apart from that, everything, the process, the chronology, everything remains the same.
Of course, thank you for that. The next question is, used cases. Is it used for any specific model or framework?
Yes, use cases. Typically, I mean, user stories are when you are doing the requirements, but use cases typically, you come across them when you are detailing certain scenarios. Like it probably comes at a much higher level, because user stories, when you are trying to doing the product development and trying to come up with the lowest work unit of work. But use cases, they talk about the entire system, and probably the way the system interacts with another system altogether. So use case is basically a very high level high level as compared to user story, which again, it provides valuable information with respect to the behavior of the system and how it has to interact with other systems. But when it comes to user stories, they are used during the product development, when you are coming up with the requirements, taking the inputs from the use cases as well. So use cases, you can consider it to be the umbrella under which use some of the user stories might take cues from there, and also inputs from there, and be written. So that way it can be a subset of the use case in some cases.
Got it. Thanks for that, Amit.
Yeah.
The next question is, can you please share example of multiple acceptance criteria under one user story?
Sure. If you can think of uh, you know anything for that matter, if I have to say, like, consider the e-commerce example, and if you have to um, yeah, for example, you consider as a end user, I would like to I would like to make the payment, so that I get a confirmation message. Say for example, you're managing your payment, and that is what you want to accomplish in that user story. So there is a user story which says, as an end user, I would like to pay through do the payment, complete the payment for the product, so that the product is delivered to me. So for this acceptance criteria, given you add your details, you will have options of probably doing it through credit card as one acceptance criteria. It can you can do it through gift cards. That can be another acceptance criteria that can also be accepted if paying through gift cards. Or if you are doing through like in Indian context, payment on delivery, that is also a separate acceptance criteria for managing the payment. And if you are selecting pay later through some of these providers, that is also a separate acceptance criteria. So you have like 4 5 6 different acceptance criteria for a single user story, which just says that he has to make the payment to get his product delivered. So these are all the multiple acceptance criteria for that particular user story. You can think of multiple others, but since we are talking about e-commerce from a long time, I thought of giving you this simple explanation.
Of
Yeah.
course. The next question by Tirtha is, can you please explain the spikes, infra, and technical stories again?
Sure. To put it in a very simple way, when you start off collecting requirements, say agile or non-agile, you will have a list of features, functionalities to be developed. So any feature functionality to be developed, you need to have certain infrastructure in place. Like for example, you need to procure certain so you need certain machines, you need certain tools, you need certain software to be able to go ahead with certain stack and some capabilities, technical capabilities, to be able to develop those features, develop those functionalities. So that is not accounted for in any of the user stories, right? Like your user stories are mainly goal based, or are based on the end user goal. So if you have to say for example decide on the technology to use, say you want to go with technology A or technology B, which is more suitable, then how will you decide? You cannot decide after developing. I mean, you cannot revert, and all that is not how agile works, right? So you should be able to allocate some time to do some research on it, do some analysis on it, maybe test that, uh, you know uh, and come up with conclusions or derive certain conclusions from them. But how will you do that if you do not estimate for that in a sprint? And like I said, agile is always it's always constant, in constant development. So you cannot do development in one stage and testing in the next, in one sprint and testing in another sprint. All the development, testing, and the feedback, everything happens in the same sprint, right? So having said that, so these spikes are nothing but those questions, the design constraints, or probably the design roadblocks that you have hit. But you have to come out of it by spending some time on analysis, which you can do by probably creating a user story for that question, so that you can estimate for that, and that can be accommodated within the sprint. Without estimating, what happens is you'll have to squeeze it between the sprints, or probably stretch the sprint, or all that. So to make it more process oriented, you probably create a user story for the spike, and then estimate for it as well. Similarly, infrastructure and technical stories, you, for example, you have to build a so you're building a gaming application. So to be able to test that, you need to build a testing tool for that game, right? And if you're not having that testing tool, then your acceptance criteria might fail. If the user is trying to do multi-user, and you don't have the capabilities to test that, you don't have the testing tool, then your test acceptance criteria will fail. So you'll also have to develop that parallelly. You need to build a testing tool which can test you and give the results um, in-house, rather than going to the customer and failing there, or probably failing the acceptance criteria. You need to account for all these as well. So that also you can uh, you know create a user story, and then estimate for that, and plan it in the sprints. So it's nothing but some technical questions, design related analysis that you need to do, or probably build something internal which does not add any value to the customer. But without building that, you will not be able to do justice. You will not be able to give I mean, pass the acceptance criteria. So you'll have to do it anyways in the user story way itself, but they are not actual user stories which gives any value to the customer. They are required for the development, product development.
Great. Thanks for that detailed answer, Amit.
Yeah.
Next question is, can you please share example of splitting of user stories?
Sure. Splitting of user stories again. Uh, there could be many examples. One user story uh, of say you want to create a website as a company owner, or as a founder. I would like to create a website so that customers can approach me from the website. Is a user story. So if that is a user story, then creating a website includes many steps. It includes multiple features, build creating a about me section, creating a about the company section, creating the the queries section where the customer can come and raise a query, or creating the products and solutions. So all these are individual user stories, which is which is part of the main user story of creating a website, right? So now if you are splitting each of these into a separate user story, then uh, that is what needs to be done to be able to accomplish it, because that will be a very big user story to begin with, creating a website, right? So that is the example that I would give.
Great. Thanks for that, Amit. Um, Tita's last question is, at times more user stories are added for a specific print to catch up with the timeline. Does this additional happen during the sprint planning itself? And how is the capacity managed during such a scenario?
So it's very rare. So that's why I said best practice is to avoid any changes, additions, or deletions during the sprint. So anything that needs to be added or removed, you do it before the sprint begins, and the sprint backlog should be locked. So adding more user stories to a specific sprint, definitely not advisable during the sprint. So if it has to be done, it has to be done prior to the sprint initiation kickoff, and then appropriately you need to to come up with a timeline. If 2 weeks are not sufficient, then probably you might go a week more, like 3 weeks or 3.5 weeks, and you can plan it before the sprint begins, and definitely not during the sprint.
Great, got it. Thank you, Amit. Um, I think, oh, someone has let us know what SPIDR stands for: Spike,
Okay.
Path, Interface, Data, and Rules.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, okay,
So yeah, I
great.
think a couple of them we covered, like spikes, splitting with the spikes we have covered. Splitting with the rules probably would group some of the uh, user stories having common rules, or some common uh, commonalities into one group, and split them and probably do them together. So you can probably understand it that way. Maybe they have some commonalities that help them to be grouped together, and then addressing them first would always make sense. So that's why splitting makes sense according to those uh, groups.
Of course. Great. I don't see any more questions, so we can maybe wait for a couple of minutes to see if we have any more questions. Tirtha has said thanks for the detailed explanation.
Welcome.
We have a lot of other people also on LinkedIn. We have Prasad who has said this has been an interesting event. We have people saying informative and comprehensive session, which I completely agree with. So until we see if we okay, we have another question from Prasad, who has asked Is it correct to say that user story is redesigning use case into user centric format?
In a way, yes, but technically no, because use case are at a very high level. Um, I would say previously, when we used to follow the traditional methods of gathering, eliciting requirements, we would still do the same. Like we would get the customer requirements, and then we would, like for example, a business analyst would then flip it over from the user's perspective to the system perspective. That is, he would probably break his head over the technicalities of what needs to be used, and provide the system perspective there. So that that is not there in the agile ways, and also it is easier for the complete stakeholders to read and comprehend, and then during the relevant stages the technical teams would anyways do the technical studies to come up with the system perspective of it while they are developing. But for all the others, from the business, the product, and the customers, it is in a very straightforward way of user centric way. So that is how I would see it. But use case is a very high level term. So use case is probably, like I said, dealing with multiple systems together, and probably very high level goal, but it is not directly translated into a user use case, sorry, user story. But in a way, yes. So that would be my long answer to this question. But just get this definition right of you. I mean, the difference of between the users perspective and the system perspective. So the difference is, uh, there is nobody flipping it into the system perspective here. It is happening happening as and when it has to be done during the development by the technical teams. So no one person is breaking his head to convert all those requirements from the user perspective uh, requirements into the system perspective. That is not happening, and use cases at a very high level. Okay, these three things, if you remember, you'll be able to understand it better.
Great. Thanks for that, Amit.
Yeah.
We have Sayada who has said, please help understand how to estimate the spike in technical debt stories.
Technical debt. Okay, good question. So technical debt again. Here we will not worry, or will not. I mean, it will not make a major difference if it is a um, analysis, or if it is infrastructure building, or if it is a technical debt. It will be still similar. Like you will be putting it across as you know as simple as a developer, um, I want to analyze or understand the technology, or probably uh, the ways of doing this, are probably to build technical capabilities, so that we will be able to achieve this goal. So that is as the general way. You'll be putting the technical debt in words, in the same format, and you'll be estimating for it, and then you'll be taking it in the sprint. So there is no change in the way that it is taken in, but you'll have to put that in words. You'll have to have a specific reason why you want to do that, and also you want to have a specific that what, why, and this one, right? So you need to probably think about it, brainstorm, and put it in there, and then estimate for it, and you'll be able to work on it. From agile perspective, you just have to put it as a user story and estimate for it. Before that, you need to brainstorm a little bit to understand where the technical debt is, and what is the technology that you want to analyze or spend time on, and the end goal has to be clear. That's all.
Great. Thanks for that, Amit. I don't see any more questions, but until then, I want to echo a lot of our audience's words of saying it has been an informative and comprehensive session, and interesting as well. I would like
Glad.
to thank you for joining us and sharing your insights and knowledge and um, all this information with us. Right? The Please accept this certificate of appreciation from the institute. The QR code on the certificate will take you to a dedicated Hall of Fame page that's been created especially for you on our website. So please accept this token of appreciation for joining us today and delivering such a wonderful session.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad that people are liking it and they found it useful. And yeah, wonderful gesture. Thank you, IPL again. Thank you so much.
I guess that brings us to the end of this session.
Thank you so
Right?
much.
So thank you once again, Amit, for joining us and delivering this wonderful masterclass. As we
Thank you.
can see, everyone found it interesting and informative and fruitful. So thank you for this.